Thank you. You may wonder what the military has to do with near-death experiences, but they deal with near-death, and because they deal with death. And so Dottie and I started this program, and I'm going to let her lead off today, but I want you to think in terms of what's going on when you have spiritual experiences in the body. And that's where we're getting insights that we want to share today. So Dottie Goodsun, my partner and co-founder.
Vet TRIIP stands for Veterans Team Recovery Integrative Immersion Process, and our mission is to honor and empower veterans, active duty service members, their families, and service providers, those that are living with post-traumatic stress, the chronic pain that often accompanies it, and related symptoms like depression. We want to help them create healthy, happy, and productive civilian lives. And many are stuck in a situation where they just can't get there. Just a couple of facts here. Most people don't realize that 2.6 million service members have been deployed since 9/11. About half have been to Iraq or Afghanistan multiple times. We know some that have been there 11 tours of duty. 50% are parents, so obviously this has a big effect on families. And some estimates, 13 to 20% may have PTSD as a diagnosed disorder. Probably a lot more than that have PTSD, mild traumatic brain injury, or major depression. And many come back with symptoms that wouldn't qualify for a diagnosis, or they won't show up for a diagnosis, but they still live with the symptoms of post-traumatic stress. 800,000 men and women, at least. So we take people that are stressed out and people that are burned out, and with a little teamwork, little help from friends, we help them reach that state of profound relaxation. They have no idea what that is until they experience a Vet TRIIP session. So I'm going to briefly explain what our program is, and then we'll move on from there. We bring veterans in groups of 4 to 8. They meet with me first for an intake session. There's some paperwork. We do EFT, the emotional freedom technique. This is tapping on your own acupuncture points for relaxation. We do it for stress relief. It can be used for many things, including military post-traumatic stress, although in our situation, we just make kind of light of it and do it for general stress relief. Some aromatherapy, we use lavender, orange, and a rosemary eucalyptus combination. If they like those smells, I just put a couple of drops in the palm of their hands, they rub it together, just hold it up and breathe and just kind of relax into it. So it's kind of a good way to get started between the tapping, the EFT, and the aromatherapy. Then we have a large room where we operate in 3 churches in San Antonio and 1 in New Braunfels. And the large rooms there have enough space for at least 8 massage tables, sometimes up to 16 or 18. So we rotate these groups of veterans in and out of the big treatment room all day long. They receive energy balancing, medical Qigong or Reiki. We have massage therapists. We have chiropractors who will not turn people into pretzels and do strong, tough manipulations. They do gentle work with activators. And then we have relaxing acupuncture with nice music, relaxing music playing the whole time. So the veterans are on the massage table for about 2 hours for all of this combination, this integrative immersion process. And we're hoping to build resilience, and we feel that we can do that through relaxation, comfort, and better sleep. And we think the biggest reason all of these can be so successful is that they have a synergy when they all work together. And the practitioners come in with really big hearts, not with big egos. No one practitioner thinks he or she can solve all the veterans' problems. They work together, each one trying to do about 15% and then passing them along to the next practitioner. So here's a picture where you see the veterans. Most of them here are underneath the blankets. Where everything's clothes on, very informal, just come in and pick a table. This picture has some massage therapists, some Reiki workers, there's a chiropractor. The acupuncturists at this point are on the other side of the room. And it's an atmosphere of very gentle, sweet energy. It is full of unconditional love. A few more pictures here. The man in the middle there, the massage therapist standing up, is Roger Allen, and he's here today, and he's been very impressed with your organization and the freedom it's given him to start talking about near-death experiences. Look for his name tag the rest of the day, Roger Allen. He's already got ideas of what he's taking from this conference and coming back to Vet TRIIP and talk to our practitioners about opening hearts even larger than they already are. And as they say in the military, we've got your back. Okay? All right. I'm going to turn this over to Bob. He's going to get into some science, which applies to everybody, but it's certainly helped us in our understanding of how to help veterans.
So I'm going to cover a lot of ground very quickly, but I want to highlight some things along the way. So we're going to be talking about military PTSD and why it's different than normal post-traumatic stress disorders, as well as complementary integrative medicine programs that seem to have a better response than single modalities. And then we'll talk about what it takes to create integrative synergy. This is what the DoD, the Department of Defense, and the VA thinks happens with PTSD. You have a trauma, and then over the first couple of days, you have a reaction to that trauma, and you bounce back. And that happens 99% of the time. After several weeks or months where you continue to have trauma, you'll start having some residual stuff. But they stuff it. They literally tell them to stick it in their thumb, ignore it, carry on, charge on. That's their tradition. In the Officer's Manual of the U.S. Army in 1996, it actually said the treatment for post-traumatic stress was to put them back in combat because the greater threat overwhelms the symptoms. And that is very effective until they come out of combat and try to operate in a civilian life. If you have it for 3 to 6 months, depending on the criteria, you'll actually can get the diagnosis, but 50% of the people do not want a diagnosis, and 50% of the people diagnosed do not want treatment. What we pointed out was in order to make the best warriors on the planet, the conditioning that goes into that training sets you up to be sympathetic nervous system dominant. And you're going to understand that more as we get along. So what you do in boot camp actually has an impact on what you do when you come out. But unlike normal conditioning, they get to use war, death, horror, blowing up your best friend as reinforcements to that conditioning that occurs in boot camp. So there's nothing else like it in terms of reinforcing very intense, strong experiences. This was put together by Walter Reed to show that it's really combat fatigue, military PTSD is really a reflection of training that makes them survivable, that makes them elite warriors, that allows them to come back home, which makes them dysfunctional at home. So if you look on the left column in the highlighted with the acronym Battle Mind, it shows you the different types of skills that they use to survive combat. And then on the right column is what happens in civilian life where it leaves them dysfunctional. Every step of the way, the very things that allows them to come home prevents them to function at home. So what you really need to do is have civilian training at the end of combat training or end of their experiences. And every generation, every major war, they come up to this and go, wow, what a great idea, but it costs too much, and then they forget to use it the next war. So here's the diagnosis, and without getting into the details, basically the A is you have exposure to a traumatic event. You no longer have to have something that's threatening your own death. It may be something like going to a funeral. One of the ladies that testified in Austin at the committee for the state senate sat down, gave her name, and she said, I never saw combat. I was in public relations Why do I have PTSD? Because I arranged all the funerals and I buried 90 of my best friends in 120 days. And then she started sobbing, and that was her testimony. There's no doubt that she had PTSD. And she had military PTSD because of the intensity of the experiences that she had. So you have 4 different groups of symptoms. You have the re-experiencing, the flashbacks, the thing that lock you up, the nightmares. You have avoidance, you just want to hide out. You have the negative mood and thoughts, which is addition to PTSD, so that now they can use SSRIs and antidepressant drugs to treat something that not really has anything to do with depression, although you would be depressed if you had to live with the symptoms that they do. And then you have the hyperarousal, where you're always on alert, you're always aware of what's going on around you, and it prevents the sleep, which then causes more problems in itself. The really important thing here is G, significant distress and functional impairment. When it starts screwing up your life, that's when you get the diagnosis. But 80% of the people that return have post-traumatic growth, that they get better from their experiences, but they still have things that interfere with life. Coming back from the war, you're not going to be able to drive on a civilian street if you've been driving trucks that anybody approaches you as a threat and you have to wipe them out. You're not going to be able to sleep when you're on the time zone back with your buddies in the Middle East, and you're always thinking about what about them. You're not going to be able to relax. Those are the things that people live with after war and that made our greatest generation after World War II. And ultimately, I think our veterans are going to be the leaders that lead the next generation. So what we do is something very simple. We don't ask them what their problem is or what caused it or anything to do with how they got there. We just ask them, what's your pain, what's your stress? 0 to 10. 0's nothing. 10's unbearable. 5 you can sleep through. And the really important thing about this scale that people don't realize is look at the 1, 2s, and 3s. You can ignore it. I dare say that most of the people in this room has pain levels or stress levels of 0, 1, or 2, or 3, right? Or at least 1, 2, or 3, right? You drove here, it's stress, you may not sleep. All those things lead to things that are just kind of daily hassles. It's part of living life. The problem comes in when you get to pain levels and stress levels of 4, it starts interfering with your life. By definition, that makes it pathological. That means a symptom that's a medical symptom. You may or may not want treatment for it or even diagnosis for it, but it starts interfering with your body's ability to recover. And at 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, you're slowly dying. You're not recovering. You're getting worse. And that's what is the real impact of PTSD. So if all we do is reduce their symptoms below 3, we win because the body starts healing itself. And here's some preliminary results. If you look on the scale on the bottom from 0 to 10, that's their intake pain level. So we group them by intake pain levels. If you look at the red line, that's their intake pain. So it's at a diagonal across the chart. The outtake pain is the green line. And the importance of this is if you come in at a pain level of 8, you're going to leave at a 2.5 on average. We're below 3. Now, if you're a 9 or 10, you're going to leave at 3, 3.5, 4 maybe, and almost invariably that's tied to cigarette smoking. And they have to detox and stop smoking, and once they stop smoking, get the toxins out of their body, then they start getting a better response. But we're able to get most of our people below 3 when they exit the door. That means they're in a healing mode, and they're doing the work, not us. Stress, we even get better results with stress. As you can see, the stress level in the yellow in the upper curve doesn't track pain completely. But the outtake stress is even less because even if you come in a stress level of 10, you're leaving at 2.5 on average. And we find that if you don't drop the pain levels, the stress levels don't come down past about 5. Now, it helps to reduce the stress to get the pain levels to come down, but the pain's more important than the stress. And people will come in for pain treatments when they'll never come in for the stigma of being treatment for PTSD. So it's a way we get them in the door, and it's a way we get them help. So it's complicated. If you look at the 4 balloons at the top, the re-experiencing hyperarousal, avoidance, and negative thoughts, those are the major classes of symptoms of PTSD, but the bottom 5 are the symptoms that interfere. They don't have good nutrition. It's buffalo wings, pizza, cheeseburgers and beer to go to sleep and Red Bull to wake up. Substance abuse, they use street drugs that treat the problem because they don't want the medications to treat the problems, because the side effects of the medications can be more powerful than the side effects of the street drugs and the fact that they're illegal. Insomnia and sleep is the crux of everything. We feel if you can get more sleep, you can process more stuff. You're more resilient. And chronic pain, any way you can cope with it, is a way we get survivors. And the complication in this war is that TBI is traumatic brain injury from concussive shocks from explosions is a major component. So it's complicated. All these other things that are not PTSD make it worse and interfere in feedback. So if you actually look at the Pain Management Task Force results, they actually looked at these 3 bubbles here. The yellow one is pain. That's 81.5% of the people have pain. The blue one is PTSD, and only 68% have PTSD, but almost identical numbers, 67% have traumatic brain injury. So the symptoms of mild traumatic brain injury are almost identical to PTSD, and they can't distinguish them without a CAT scan or an MRI, and even then that doesn't tell them. But pain is more important than the rest of it. That's why we focus on both symptomology. And it's all related. All those things are factors. And if you don't take care of one of them, you're not going to take care of the rest of them. So we used to spend a lot of time explaining and justifying and showing research and saying that complementary integrative medicine works. We now just point to these organizations: the National Institute of Health, Center for Complementary and Integrative Health. The Brave Well Collaborative has the top 50 medical schools in the country, and all come together to make integrative medicine programs because they work and will reduce 80% of what kills us over the age of 50. If you just make 7 lifestyle changes, you're going to reduce the death rate by 80%. That's got other complications. We went to Duke Integrative Medicine, which was the first integrative medicine program in the United States at a major medical school. We went to Fort Bliss, where they did have the Fort Bliss Restoration Resilience Program by John Fortunato. And we went to the Fort Hood program on the lower right-hand side, where Jerry West just retired. And those programs, which were the best treatment programs for military PTSD in the United States, both had a single flaw. They had a single founder who was charismatic, who was brilliant, who put together programs that did phenomenal things. But it was only treating 120 to 200 people, and Fort Hood alone has over 10,000 people that need it. It has to be duplicated, it has to be leveraged, it has to spread across the communities across the United States. And that's what Vet TRIIP did from the very beginning, is make a model that can be duplicated, and we're duplicating it. May not be in your community today, tomorrow, this year, next year, but we hope in 5 years to be running 100,000 sessions a year across the United States, and that will make an impact because you all will be part of that solution. Scientific American, part of Nature magazine, has covers talking about meditation, electric cures, and how music heals the mind. It's got scientific credibility now. But the bottom line is, how do you relax? How do you teach people to relax? So when we started doing complementary integrative medicine, the biggest problem is nobody gives you any guidelines. How do you integrate? How do you keep things from messing up? How do you make things work? Well, of course, you don't want to do any harm. I don't have a medical license. I cannot hurt people for a living and charge them money. So I have to do what's good anyway. Anything I suggest has to be generally good for everybody. Now, there's always going to be somebody it doesn't work for. But you have to do what's good anyway. If you avoid the negative, if you avoid giving them a drug that kills a certain number of the people that take the drug, you don't have to worry about killing them as part of the side effects. So we do what's good anyway. And we do what doesn't interfere. If you think that increased circulation is good for you, tell somebody that's having a wound that's bleeding out or hemorrhagic stroke, good circulation is not a good thing. You have to know how they fit together. Chiropractic is the best treatment for musculoskeletal, back pain, neck pain, those type of problems, and yet they say it has no impact on PTSD, but pain keeps you awake at night and makes you hypervigilant. And if you reduce the pain, you reduce both of those, which are 2 major side effects or direct symptoms of PTSD. So obviously chiropractic has an effect on PTSD, but if you do the bone-crunching chiropractic that makes pain, all of a sudden you trigger the PTSD, you have no net benefit. You have to do it gently with no pain. So we actually have to take our massage therapists, chiropractors, and acupuncturists and teach them how to do their modality without pain. How about that? Isn't that a novel approach? It transforms their practice because they go back and go, I don't have to hurt you anymore in order to get a benefit. We have 6 other things, but I don't have time to cover it. Oh, but the 4th one is just as important because the placebo effect. How many people know what the nocebo effect is? A few of you. That's the negative placebo effect. Morphine works about 70% of the time. The net drug effect is only about 35% because the positive placebo effect is 35%. But 30% of the people with chronic high levels of pain have no benefit from morphine in pain reduction. It causes other side effects, but it doesn't affect the pain. That's called the nocebo effect. So the nocebo effect is 35%. The placebo effect is 35%. Why are we spending all the money, time, and effort to look at drugs that only work 20 to 30% of the time? That's science. That's evidence-based. You use their evidence to show them that you need to do something else. So we're going to talk about briefly some of the things that go on in the mind as well in the brain as well as the body that leads to recovery, resilience, and then briefly touch upon the suicide and pain. So this is very intimidating to some people that look at a structure of the brain and say, wow, that's really gross. But to me, it's fascinating because for the first time, we're starting to understand what happens when you have an anxiety attack. And so the left picture is obviously the brain, looking over to the right. And the blue area is the prefrontal lobe. That's what makes humans humans. That's what makes you a mature adult. That's what makes you creative. It regulates the rest of the body. You may have a panic response, but if that part of your brain says, it's okay, it's a stick, it's not a snake, you're fine. But it's slow. And if you're walking through the woods and you see something that might be a snake or might be a stick, if you don't jump, you might get bit. So the brain is wired to tell you to jump before you think about it. Is it yellow, black, kills a fellow, red, whatever? Ooh, ouch. So the part of the brain that does that is called the amygdala. It's buried. There's 2 of them, one on each side, right around the ear on the temporal lobe. And it's that little tiny little yellow thing in the center of that whole thing of the brain. And if it says snake, or maybe a snake, you jump. And it's twice as fast as the prefrontal lobe where you think about it. And it does something else. It turns off the blood flow so you don't think about it, gets in the way of jumping. So that works great when you jump and there's a snake. But if there's a stick and you're constantly jumping around, it becomes dysfunctional. That's PTSD in a nutshell. So it actually turns off the blood flow or reduces the blood flow to the prefrontal lobe, and that's on the right side. You can see that it's going like dead. It's not dead. It doesn't turn it off completely. But if you trigger somebody with PTSD and then have a nice logical conversation with them, it's not working. It's going past. If you don't believe me, get into an argument, a really emotional argument with your spouse or partner, and then sit down and try to talk logically. One doctor, Walter Reed, says when somebody tells you to calm down and you've been triggered, you might as well reach over there and slap them in the face because it does more good than anything else. You might get a kick out of it and laugh about it, and that breaks the tension. Laughter resets the nervous system. One of many things that we take advantage of. So coming back to our military PTSD, the model that we've added to and point out the boot camp's important and so is the civilian training, we also come in and say that you have to have a program that trains the brain neuroplasticity, and that takes up to 6 months to have that happen. And if your treatment programs only last 30 days to 6 weeks, you haven't even scratched the surface. And that's why we instituted programs that last 3 months, and we hope to have them going for a year or more. But the military is finally catching up on this and realize that you have to have mental resilience as well as physical resilience, and that's a whole nother topic, but just to point out that they're starting to come around. And I want to address the suicide issue. 22 suicides a day in the United States on average. The death rate, suicide rate for Vietnam veterans is almost as high now as it was after the war. And they did a study finally, my type of study. They asked 72 soldiers, they were Marines at Fort Carson, University of Utah did this. They asked them, why do you attempt suicide? And they got great answers. Out of 33 reasons that they all said, each person had on average about 10 reasons. It was complex. Out of 33 reasons listed, they all had one single reason as number one. Guess what it was? They hurt. They had emotional distress, psychological suffering and pain. They want to put a stop to the pain. Well, the brain can't tell the difference between emotional pain and physical pain. So if we can reduce pain, we take away the driving force for the suicides. And the doctors that did the study started changing the counseling to reduce pain and asked these soldiers, are you hurting? And the suicide rate improved almost immediately. That's why we do pain relief with our stress relief. It's complicated. So I'm going to briefly rush through the rest of this so I do not cut off Dottie's time. I'll be happy to talk more about it, but I did the battle mind versus civilian mind. I flipped the chart so you can see what happens when you put it in Chinese medicine and you talk about yin and yang. Civilian is yin, feminine, relaxed, calm. Yang is masculine, fight or flight. It's soldiers. That's what they trained their body to be, and it's run by adrenaline. The adrenaline junkies. They're trained to do that. That's why they do superhuman things in wartime. That's why we have the best elite warriors on the planet. That's what makes them dysfunctional. Try to get a Marine to get in touch with their feminine side. Even if they're a female Marine, they've been told to stuff it. That's what we're doing. We're getting them back into balance. You've seen this, but what's most important about the autonomic nervous system is for years they thought that the fright response is part of the sympathetic nervous system, and they were 100% wrong. The freeze response. The freeze response is actually a separate part of the autonomic nervous system, and this is called polyvagal theory by Stephen Porges. There's the safety, the relaxation, the feminine, get together, talk about it. That's why the baboons were able to chase the lions away from their locations, because they all talked and communicated. The danger is the fight or flight. That's when you get enraged and berserk and go crazy and you either run like lightning or you fight back. And then there's the life threat. And this is what's so important for NDEs. Because when you have an NDE, you're in the life threat. You're freezing. Now, typically the freeze response is like Bambi sitting there not moving. Or even a possum that falls over. Faints. It can be pathological when you go into shock and you start shutting down parts of the body. And babies that have a freeze response and newborn, it will actually slow their heart to the point of killing them. That's how this was discovered. Because in adults, it tends to make the heart beat faster in some cases. What's important here is they go into a sleep-type state, and you can approach it without having the shock response, and it dumps massive amounts of endorphins into the brain, and the brain's inhibitions are eliminated, and you start experiencing spiritual things. This is what happens to the body and the mind when you have a near-death experience. The physiology of that. And we find that when we reach a state of profound relaxation for our veterans on the table, they go through this gently, wonderfully, peacefully, and come out and start having spiritual experiences, which Dottie's going to mention here shortly. How about that? Okay, a little fun here. This is complicated. There's 12 cranial nerves. That's the basis for it. What's really important is the vagus nerve takes care of everything that's important. That's why our veterans with stress and chronic hypervigilance have almost all digestive problems. All of a sudden, it's explaining all these things that don't seem to make sense. So they were looking at music and tried to find out what music would make the best impact on babies to calm them. Let me see if I can do this. Uh-oh. Johnny Mathis. Listen to the prosody, the music in his voice, the way he sings.
Someday
Okay, so how many people know people that use that music to put somebody in the mood of being relaxed and receptive? Okay, different generation. The number one music in the entire world, even in desert countries that didn't have snow, that were not Christian, 100 million copies of this sold worldwide since he first sang it. Same voice. If you didn't know it was a different singer in a foreign country, you'd probably think it's the same guy. Okay, this generation. Yes, I already heard that. Oh, yeah. One lady said, let's go to the beginning, because the beginning is where it gets into it. I had one woman said, husband loves that song. I go, no, he loves the way you respond to that song. So you want a clinical study with a few million people? Check that out. But Amazing Grace is one of the fundamental songs across religions around the world, and it has the same type of prosody in the voice. It calms the wild beast, and it turns out that singing in a choir syncs your heart and your lungs with everybody else in the room. Now, you don't want to sing Twisted Sister and Judas Priest and all that stuff, which is battle music for our soldiers, and they listen to it when they come home. You want them to do the other stuff. And it's that profound and it's that powerful. So I'm going to turn this over for the next 20 minutes to Dottie, who's going to have some phenomenal case histories, and then we'll take a few questions.
At the end of each Vet TRIIP session, each veteran is given a form to fill out as an evaluation, and they can write whatever they want. But it's generally after several sessions when some of them are comfortable enough to share with us verbally some of their experiences. We have one former Marine, served in Vietnam. First time he came to us, he had a motorized scooter, and he didn't talk. He would answer questions, direct questions, but he was very, very quiet. Sometime later, he came back using a walker, and he still didn't talk. A little bit later, he came back with a cane. That's all he needed to help him walk. And at some point, he just needed to keep on his knee braces. He didn't need any assistance from anything mechanical for walking. And he made me sit down beside him after a session, and he said, "I'm talking now." And I didn't know how to respond. So he repeated it, "I'm talking now." I was like, well, that's wonderful. I'm glad you're talking. He taught us a lot through his ability, his willingness to share. He used to spend every night in his garage with his dog and 2 six-packs of beer just to get to the point where he could sleep that night. He quit drinking, he quit using assistance for walking, and he was able to share with us that when he leaves the house to go to a vet trip, he calls out to his wife, "Honey, I'm going to heaven. I'll be back, but I'm going to heaven right now." And he has shared that it is a spiritual experience for him. The pain that is left, the ability to deal with his past is in a whole different light now. And he's just one of many that just touch our hearts. And he, like others, tend to call us and all of our service providers angels. And I used to go, no. And then I realized I shouldn't discount that I don't feel like I'm an angel, but I do feel a very angelic connection when you help people get to a point where they can live with their past and start dealing with some things, let go of the pain. It reminds me another younger veteran, combat veteran, served his 20 years, and by 40 he was retired, but didn't know how he was going to make it through civilian life. He said, at my first vet trip, my heart stopped hurting. He thought he had had a physical problem with his heart that the doctors had not been able to explain. But in the presence of unconditional love, his heart stopped hurting and has never hurt again. He shared later, "I have lost my raging desire for revenge." He'd been living with this desire to get back at someone who had made costly decisions, cost some of his friends their lives, and he was stuck in that. And when you're stuck in these situations with post-traumatic stress and revenge thoughts, the body chemicals running through your body and your brain all the time do not allow healing. But this man was very, very sensitive to energy, and he picked up on the love right away, and that's carried him through. He's now taken college courses. We don't see him very often, but he says if he hadn't had Vet TRIIP, he would not be able to sit through the classes. He wouldn't have the patience, the tolerance. He couldn't think well enough to study and pass his test. So I think the profound relaxation allows people to come back to themselves, to let go of what needs to be in the past and deal with the present from a standpoint of love and acceptance, patience and tolerance for everybody. And that brings out the spiritual side. That allows them to get back to spirit within them and to see the spirit within others. We have another Vietnam veteran who came in the first time, really had a mean look on his face. He was angry. He wasn't angry at us, but he was angry about a lot of things in his past that he was still dealing with. And he started complaining about traffic. And it wasn't anything controversial, but he was kind of escalating. You could see the face getting red, and you know, I needed to change the topic right away because it could have upset some other veterans just seeing him escalate. And he did fine the rest of the session. He came back 2 weeks later. He was very, very quiet, and I didn't know what to make of that. The third time, he came in and said, "Vet TRIIP has changed me. I don't care if somebody cuts me off in traffic now. I don't have to get mad at them. They can be a stupid driver. God will love them too, but I don't have to get mad." Profound, profound change, and he's still that way. We have a younger veteran who told us when he served in Iraq several times, he could never go to church because the enemy knew when the soldiers might show up in church, and if they did, the church would be bombed. So he was isolated from any kind of church service and, of course, dealing with, day-to-day survival. And he came to several Vet TRIIP sessions, and of course each one was in a church, and they happened to be 3 different churches the way the timing worked out for him. And so he told me, I can be in a church now and I can feel safe. It's really got me thinking. Another veteran said, I was lying on the table, feeling really good, and all of a sudden I was aware of this bright light streaming down upon me, like nothing I've ever experienced. And then there was this strong presence behind me at my head, and these huge angel wings just enfolded me. And it was the most incredible experience I've ever had. I don't know how to explain it. I don't know what was happening. I don't know what to think about it. But it was incredible. We have a Navy veteran, the female. She used to work on airplanes on the big carriers. So she had a very intense, stressful job. She at one time had such intense pain in her feet that she was basically isolated. She couldn't work, she couldn't get out of the house. She had just about given up on everything. Several Vet TRIIP sessions really helped her with that pain. She's now working full-time for the Texas Veterans Commission. But she comes back maybe once a year, and the last time she was lying on the table and she had had all the services, And she kept lying there and thinking, well, I think I'm probably finished. I don't know why somebody's still working on my feet. And she was very patiently waiting for this person to finish working on her feet when she really needed to leave. She was ready to go. And she finally motioned over to a service provider that she could see and said, I really need to go. Would you tell whoever it is working on my feet, I'm very grateful, but I kind of need to go. And the service provider said, there's no one working on your feet. And she was shocked. And she told Bob this, and he said, what was the person's name? And she said, well, I have no idea. That person wasn't there. I don't know what I was feeling. And he said, could her name have been Rebecca? Well, I don't know. Well, ask yourself, kind of go within your heart and say, her name is Rebecca, and see how you feel. And then he said, now, go into your heart again and say, her name is not Rebecca, it's something else. And Bob said, now, do you know what her name is? She said, it's Rebecca. Rebecca passed away about 3 weeks before this event. Rebecca is Bob's mom and a healer from way back in her own way. So can we prove any of this? We can't, but we know. These experiences are very real to the people experiencing them. We have another veteran from South Texas who's gone 40 years without medical care of any kind. His body started to break down, and this is kind of typical of Vietnam veterans who have stuffed the pain, stuffed the post-traumatic stress for years. Typically, they came back to a country that did not welcome them home, treated them very badly, called them names, made them feel terrible, and the way they coped was just to stuff the pain and stuff the stress. A lot of them got married, had families, had jobs successfully, but something happens when the body's breaking down physically and mentally, usually late 50s, 60s, and they end up filing claims for post-traumatic stress many, many years after their war experiences. That's what happened to this man. He came in intense pain. All he wanted was the physical relief. And then months later, he came in, he had just 25 minutes on a massage table with Reiki and Qigong, just energy work. And he sat up and he called Bob over and he said, I've been seeing colors, really good colors. Like that lady, that service provider over there, she is purple. And this one over here, she's light blue, a really nice light blue. And this lady, she's yellow, but if she really worked at it, she could make that golden. This is one of the last peoples on earth you would think would be talking about colors and seeing the light in people and recognizing things he would never have before been aware of. There's a very, very sweet energy in the treatment rooms, and it's more powerful than just anything you would expect. So it's partly the church atmosphere. It's the angels who show up. It's all the service providers with big hearts. And it's the veterans who are opening their hearts to accept healing, to accept a healing path, and to move on. Okay? Did I leave anything out?
Until you see these people that are either 40 years from the battlefield, still living the battles, or you see these men and women coming back from the current war, and have them spontaneously tell you these stories, do you realize when it starts happening on a frequent basis that we have something here that we didn't explain, we didn't intend, is just spontaneously arising out of it? I understand there's a counselor at one of the VAs that's integrating near-death experiences in some of the processing for military PTSD. I think that's a great combination. I've learned so much over the years about neuroplasticity in the brain and how the brain changes itself. And there's two basic mechanisms. One is through repetition. Just like cleaning your weapon, just like PT in the morning, just like whatever you do that you repeat enough, you get very, very proficient at it, and the brain starts rewiring and it starts myelinating and laying down new tracks that are very efficient. And it takes about 30 to 90 days to start that process. It takes 90 to 180 to myelinate and make it much more efficient. Or you can have one single spiritual, emotional experience and transform your life in that one experience. The problem with PTSD and military PTSD is you don't know what's going to come out of that. It's totally uncontrolled. It's totally chaotic. And it's very, very intense. It's life and death, war, the horrors of war. And we think that by laying the groundwork with this relaxation, with this ability to calm things down, and then teach them how to do that, that builds the muscle and exercise so that they're better prepared to handle it when they do have that significant emotional event. That's where the link is. That's where we think we're going to make a fit. There are no atheists in foxholes has been said over and over again. It was attributed to Ernie Pyle. If you ever want to have some incredible stories, let's read Ernie Pyle's stories from the front in World War II, and you'll know why that generation loved the man. So it's all about relaxation. Animals know how to do it. Kids know how to do it. It may be simple as having some stones and some sand. Or it can be as much as get away to a place like that attracts me. But we have to give back to our service providers because we're run by volunteers. Last year we delivered $382,000 worth of services with a $32,000 budget because our people gave 2,166 days of service over the last 3 years. And that in itself is powerful because the veterans say, how do you pay for this? I go, they're all volunteers, and they go, oh, gratitude received and given are both therapeutic, and many of our veterans are coming back to be trained medically so they can do this and give back. But those that serve, in order to keep them coming, we have to have some benefits for them. So the number one benefit is they get to serve. We teach them how to do integrative medicine in an integrative environment and actually work with other professionals, medical professionals, healthcare professionals, on big cases. I mean, the only time you get to do that if you're a surgeon is on Saturday night at the local ER or combat medicine in the field, in combat. We have people coming in. We had one young man, 23 years old, 26 gunshot wounds and 98 surgeries. His mom said he never sleeps. He fell asleep on the table. She had to get off of her table in order to come over and see that he fell asleep after the first hour. He came in at 8-8 on stress and pain. He left on 0-0 on stress and pain. So having the opportunity to work together in a safe environment on very complex and severe cases is training you cannot get any other way that I know of for complementary and integrative medicine. But it's the community that does this, and it gives them a means to welcome in veterans, embrace them, and help them, and have the satisfaction of participating in that process. So I'm going to leave you with two stories. One of them is the two wolves. And this dates back several hundred years, and it was written down 50 years ago, and it was on the internet by 84, so I borrowed it. But it shows what a warrior culture knows about the autonomic nervous system. It goes like this. A young Indian boy went to his father full of anger, grandfather, at a friend who had done him an injustice. The grandfather said, "Let me tell you a story. I too at times have felt a great hate for those who have taken so much with no sorrow for what they do. But hate wears you down and does not hurt your enemy. It's like taking poison and wishing your enemy would die. I've struggled with these feelings many times. He says, it's as if there are two wolves inside me. One is good and does no harm. He lives in harmony with all around him and does not take offense when no offense was intended. He will only fight when it's right to do so and in the right way. But the other wolf, he's full of anger. The littlest thing will set him into a fit of temper. He fights everyone all the time for no reason. He cannot think because his anger and hate are so great. It is helpless anger, for his anger will change nothing. Sometimes it's hard to live with these two wolves inside me, for both of them try to dominate my spirit. The boy looked in his grandfather's eyes and asked, "Which one wins, grandfather?" "The one you feed." Every culture on the planet has a tradition of healing their warriors when they come back from war, and we've forgotten our tradition. This is the opportunity. So here's what we pose as a last question. What happens with 800,000 warriors return home with PTSD? And they become healers. Thank you. Questions? Yes.
Yes, but I was wondering when you were talking about maximizing the placebo effect, do you actually explain to them how all of this works together for their parasympathetic nervous system and brain
Yes, we go into a
plasticity?
great deal about the autonomic nervous system to veterans that just came back from war who have PTSD and are not thinking logically. No, of course we don't. You have to do it. And I'll show you, if I may, one way we get into them and show them how to stop the pain. They already know how to do it. And on that basis, then we go into, okay, we can do these things to relax the anxiety. And you can do that as well because you're trained in energy as a combat warrior. Here's their number one way to get rid of back, knee, and feet pain. You want to see it? It's very unusual. What's that called? Prayed rest. The science behind it is the back of the hand calms the sympathetic ganglia in the small of your back, and when that happens, you increase circulation down your legs and the lymphatic drainage back out of your legs. And if you do it the way we teach them, in 5 minutes, your back, knees, and feet stop hurting or at least feel a whole lot better. And they go, well, I already know how to do that. Yeah, the military's been doing it for 239 years, and it's a 4,000-year-old Qigong technique. So now you find out that they know how to use energy better than you do. Only they've been taught to use it for combat and warfare. So all you have to do is show them how to use that same energy flow for healing, and they're naturals. They're better healers than civilians are. They have more energy, more power. They have more pathways to control that energy than you do, most of you. So would you like to see how this works? Sure. Okay, so everybody stand up if you may. If you can't stand up, do it sitting. You can easily do it. I'll put one or both hands in the small of your back with the back of the hands up against the back. And the way you do it was visualization and breathing, just like yoga and other techniques. So take 3 slow, deep breaths and visualize making the palm of the hands warm, especially when you breathe out. If you can visualize breathing out through the palm of the hands. We don't tell the veterans that. We just tell them, make your palm of your hands warm. So 3 breaths. I'm a swimmer, so I can breathe out for a long period of time. So take long, slow exhales. Once more. Focus on the palm of your hand. And once more. How many people feel better? Nod your head. Cooling, relaxing, calming. Okay, now turn your hands around and put one or both on the small of your back or your hips, your sciatica, whatever. It feels good and it's comfortable to reach. Now take 3 slow, deep breaths and put energy into your body from the palm of your hands. Now. Once more. And once more. How many people like that? Nod your head. 3rd step, point your fingers just like this. point to your floor on the side of your legs like that. If you're sitting down, just put your hands on your knees, take 3 slow deep breaths, and visualize that warmth that you just put in your back and your hips to sink down into your knees and your feet. It's not a forcing thing, it's a relaxation. Allow it to sink. 1 breath. Another breath. And once more. How many people feel better? Isn't that cool? You're already trained. So that's how we get in the door. We can't sell anything to somebody that's not buying. They have to be ready to accept. And when we show them how to do it themselves, hi Marty, it gives you an opportunity to then start with the other things. The anxiety, turns out the vagus nerve on the right side is descending, so you can put the back of the hand on the right side of your neck. You can also stick a 4-inch needle with Marcaine in it and do it in 10 seconds, but who wants a 4-inch needle with Marcaine in it? Eugene Liphoff discovered this technique while he was working in Chicago with a veteran that had severe pain down his right shoulder, and he did this stellate ganglia block. It turns out the C6 ganglia is the one you want to do. And when he did this with a needle, it turned off his PTSD as well as his pain in 10 seconds. Also works for hot flash. So you can actually do that and calm somebody down. We had a guy come in who had a panic attack and leaned up against the table with his cane and was just kind of standing there like this. He was nonverbal. He couldn't say anything. He told us later, I've never been in a room and had a panic attack that I didn't have to leave the building. They did Bob now, which means, Bob, we got an issue. Came over to him, introduced myself. They said, Dan's having a little anxiety. Well, Dan was like this. I said, here's what we do. It may or may not work, but if you don't want to do it, that's fine. I can do it for you, and if it works, you can stay. If it doesn't work, you can leave, and I'll help you. Okay? So I said, what do you do is this. And then there's 2 points on the top of the head I'll get to later another time. Maybe not today. And so I started doing this, and I said, may I do that on you? Now, when a combat veteran, you better ask to touch them, or else you'll trigger a reaction many times. So I asked him, he said, yes, I did this. And 30 seconds later, he was saying, well, you know, it feels pretty good. And 5 minutes later, he was face down on the table with 2 strangers putting hands all over him. It takes 20 minutes for the brain to calm down naturally after being triggered. We did it in 30 seconds. How's that? He does that every night to go to sleep. Hey, Marty.
Hi.
Real quick, we have to wrap up in the next minute or two.
All right, this will be a challenge. All right, I'm just very privileged to have been in Chapel Hill, and I took the Vet TRIIP training program, stage 2. It's just awesome. I use it. And just last night, in this room, after working a long day running around, this one veteran volunteer for the INs was saying, my feet hurt. Who wants to massage my feet? And I said, we were leaving the room, and I said, were you really serious about that? He said, well. I said, well, okay, let's try something. And we did it, basically the way you just showed us. And I said, is your pain gone? He said, yeah. So it was so easy, and what I encouraged him to do, once you learn something like this, you turn around and you share it with somebody else, then you have a 95% chance of remembering it. So
Absolutely.
he showed his partner, and now she's doing it too, and she's going to now remind him to do it whenever he says, I got sore feet. They got a tool they can use now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marty. No matter how good Bob and Dottie are, we can't touch everybody. But if we get Marty and show him how to do it, and he goes and just tells everybody, if we get it out there and we spread the word, it becomes viral in the best way. So every program out there that has a charismatic leader that has failed because it's a charismatic leader and nobody can duplicate it, they led the way, but y'all are going to continue it and make it happen. So thank you for the opportunity to let us be here.